Well, welcome everyone to the Chappaqua Library. My name is Joan Kuhn and I'm the program coordinator at the Chappaqua Library. I would like to, at this point, not introduce the people who are going to speak in a few minutes, but encourage everybody in the Westchester community to attend their local libraries and to go on the websites of their local libraries to find all the wonderful programs that are being offered. It's the name of the library plus.org, and you too could see all the offerings that we present at your local libraries. And now with that, I would like to thank the co-sponsoring libraries for today's program. I'd like to thank Harrison Library, Mount Kisco Library, Mount Pleasant Library, Pound Ridge Library, Tuckahoe Library, Warner Library, and Yorktown Library for that continued support. And for this evening's program, it's not afternoon, this is getting dark. This is a program, this is National Poetry Month. April is National Poetry Month, and we're thrilled to have two award-winning poets coming to the Chappaqua Library virtual series to talk and to read their poetry. The first member, the person who contacted me first, is Harriet Shenkman. Harriet is Professor Emeritus at the City University of New York, and she was on the advisory board of the Women's National Book Association. Her poetry awards include Women's National Book Association Annual Contest and Women Who Work International Poetry Contest. Her poetry has appeared in so many publications that I'm not reading them. That's how much she is published. And you could easily see all the places that she was published by going and Googling her. She has also taped a reading for Westchester Library System, and you could find it on the Westchester Library System website. Her newest book is called Wonder Wheel, and it's available at Amazon.com. Her former past books, I guess you would say, was The Present, Abandoned, and Teetering. And she will be talking soon and reading her book. The second poet we're having is Suzanne Cleary, and her recent books are Crude Angel and Beauty Mark. Beauty Mark won the John, I hope I get this right again, Cicardi Prize for Poetry, the Nassar Poetry Prize, and the Patterson Award for Literary Excellence. She is the recipient of the Pushcart Prize and the Cecil Hemley Memorial Award for the Poetry Society of America. Her poems appear in Best American Poetry Anthology, Poetry London, The Atlantic, Southern Review, and she is a teacher for the MFA course in creative writing at Converse University. So please welcome the poets, Harriet and Suzanne.
And I'd like to just give a special welcome to Suzanne Cleary. Suzanne is an esteemed and accomplished poet, and she was my teacher. And I am so honored to be reading with her. And I must say, and I think all her students would say, that she was a very inspiring, encouraging, and generous student. And I really do appreciate having the opportunity to read with her. And I'd like to invite Suzanne to read from her work. And then we're also going to ask her about a manuscript in progress later on.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction from you, Joan, and also from you, Harriet. I thank you, Harriet, for inviting me to read with you, and Joan for hosting us today. And I thank each of you who are out there in the Zoomosphere watching us and listening to us today. And I know Harriet and I cannot wait to answer your questions after Harriet's finished her reading. So I'm going to be first reader, and I'm going to start by reading the first poem in my newest book, Crude Angel. And this poem is about one of the ugliest pieces of clothing I have ever worn. And for those of you who are writers, you might use that as a writing prompt or write about some other article of clothing. Anyway, here's my most hideous article of clothing. The poem is called Horse Jacket. I am the woman who bought the mustard yellow denim jacket, painted across its back the head of a turquoise horse, its mane orange, its eyes lime green, acrylic paint so thick the jacket was heavy as a wet newspaper. God, I loved that jacket. From the front, it looked almost respectable, practical, made to last. From the back, it looked like a carousel from hell. Hell, I wore that jacket day and night, from late adolescence into late arriving adulthood, a jacket fit for all seasons, if any at all. Wore it home the day I bought it at the New York City 23rd Street flea market from a woman who had hung each of her hand-painted jackets on a wire hanger, lifted each hanger onto the chain link fence. I was 19 years old, she the age that I am now, her hair gray, her eyes gray, her nail polish flat black. She wore a red jacket, raised her arms and spun like a ballerina to show me. Its ears are wrong. It doesn't look like a horse, which was true but irrelevant, as her brief dance attested. The mustard yellow jacket draped a metal chair, waiting for a woman who had left a $10 bill, said she'd return with the rest of the money, disappeared. It's yours, honey, for the difference, the woman said. And I bought that jacket for $10 and change, for the promise it held of a life like no other. I wore it without irony. I wore it with love. I hand washed it in cold water. I wore it from apartment to apartment those years I moved almost yearly, thinking I would know my home as I had known my jacket the moment I saw it. Home would be the place where I, too, would work on my art until late at night, as did the woman who held her mustard yellow jacket for the last time as I slipped my arms into the sleeves, as she told me again how to care for it, as if the jacket were a pet she was giving away, as in fact it was. It was her horse, and now it was mine. I generally don't believe in inspiration as being necessary for writing a poem. Instead of believing in inspiration, I believe in observation. And most of my poems come from things that I see or things that I read. And this next poem that I'm going to read is a poem that I was struggling with for a while because I thought there was just one subject that I was going to stick with, and that would be the entire poem. But then I read something and I realized, oh, wait a minute, that belongs in this poem I'm struggling with. So this poem is named for the street on which I live. The street and the poem are both called Elm Street. I am so happy to see the man who lives in the house on the corner sit on the porch with a guitar on his knee, one arm draped loosely, as if he patiently scans a vast repertoire, choosing which song to play, or as if he has stopped mid-song to tighten a string, then decided to just listen to Elm Street and compose a new song. Notes his fingers will find and follow. For Elm Street is a steep hill that draws skateboarders like a magnet, that makes drivers roll down the truck window and stick an elbow out. Elm Street has been here since before it had a name, dirt path from hilltop to river. I am happy if the man is new to the guitar, pauses in the middle of the only song he knows because he has lost his place or lost touch with the touch he has learned to imitate late nights in his attic room rental. This middle-aged man who works second shift, home now for the night, which he will fill perhaps with song, or with stray notes that make song of the silence between them. For sometimes song is beyond our reach, as found the art student who dutifully copied masterpieces until he saw his true gift, forgery. For a brief time, he built a life on copying Matisse, quote, for his simple line, close quote, unable to see that the line halted when the painter paused to look at his model. The line resumed with hesitance, a quaver the forger could never replicate, conceding, I mastered his line. It was his pause I could not master. Finally, having seen that to see the model is to quaver in her presence, is to carry forward what little you can balance on the tip of the brush. Silence, big silence that surrounds us. Some of us dare to hear you. Tonight, I am happy it is the man on the corner instead of me who sits in your presence and readies himself to play. I do read quite a lot, but one of the things that I read every day is the obituaries. I have done this as long as I can remember, and I think part of my fascination with the obituaries is that it's a wonderful place to just see how people have lived their lives. And it's a source of endless fascination for me. So this particular poem is a poem that I wrote after reading a particular obituary, and I have excerpted from the obituary as an epigraph to this poem. And the epigraph I'll read first. It is from the New York Times obituaries dated February 19th, 2010. And I'll tell you that I read that obituary and I knew I wanted to write a poem about it, and it took me years and years and years to write the poem. So here's the epigraph from the obituaries. It says, a longtime Manhattan resident, Ms. Fran Lee advised radio and television audiences on household and consumer issues from the late 1940s until well into the 90s. Her purview ranged from cyclamates to asbestos to how to make a candle from a sausage. Sausage candle. Stick a wick in a sausage and light it, and you've got a candle. It's flame fed by fat. Not that you'd burn it on your birthday cake. Not that you'd light two and process to an altar. Not that you'd want one, even a small one, flickering over your romantic dinner. But the sausage candle gives light. The sausage candle gives light. Think of the books you could read by the light of that candle. Think of the dark passages it might, given the chance, illuminate. It is better to light one sausage than to curse the darkness. Imagine for a moment you dare set a sausage candle atop your cake and you close your eyes and you wish. Think of the wishes you could make if you weren't afraid of the ridiculous. I thought to follow a sausage candle with a more traditional poem and a more traditional subject in a traditional form. This poem is about spring, and the poem is a sonnet, and the poem is called Woodpecker. Known for your blunt beak beating against bark, Your voice described impatient, loud, slurred. You are not Peterson's favorite bird. Your grating sound is nothing like the lark. It's more like the tire chains shudder, torque, as the snowplow fights downshift into third. Tree clung, chisel billed, wood boring bombard. You are not spring, except the grinding work of spring, clearing fallen branches, raking dead leaves, piling stone onto stones. Thick beak, hacking bark is your truest song, clacking, knock, 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 loud, unapologetic. Unlike the birds that trill and soar, you moor, you drill, pursuing spring's interior. I'm going to read 2 more poems for you. And this poem is also a poem about something that I saw um, when I was in vacationing in California with my husband, and we went to the Sony Pictures studio in Culver City, California. And that's where MGM did a lot of its filming. And this was just, I was very, very excited about this tour. But in the middle of the tour, our tour guide said something just in passing. And I'm not sure that I heard anything else she said because I found this fact so fascinating. And I will tell you that she told us that there are professionals who come into the sound studio after a film scene has already been shot, and they provide the sounds to films. Well, I knew this, but I didn't know that there are people who specialize in particular sounds. Kind of makes sense now, I guess. This particular person who our tour guide mentioned specializes in kisses. So this particular poem is about the place where we were, a dubbing room, and the poem is called Dubbing Room. We crowd into the small booth, stare out at the man kissing his arm, his mouth pressing the back of his hand so his loose fist bobs like the head of a baby nursing, sucking with furious instinct, its whole body gulping with pleasure, unlike this professional whose pleasure we imagine the measured sigh of a job well done, this pucker and soft pull, this wetting the lips precisely so they will not chap as he works, his one eye on the movie screen. 2 actors, clothed only in pink light, lie on a beach, their kisses falling short of even the latest sound equipment, and so their kisses are supplied today as we watch. The tall, heavy-set man wears a plaid shirt, one sleeve rolled to the elbow. The kiss begins, it seems, not in his lips, but in his hand, lips responding to the rise and fall of his right hand, which he supports with his left for control, or maybe for comfort, to ease the ache in his right shoulder and the crook of his neck. Although he may court pain to inform these kisses, for the actors seem full of sorrowful ardor there in the Pacific's rising tide. He turns his hand over, now kissing the underside of his forearm, where the skin is petal smooth. I cannot turn away from him, despite the beautiful lovers twice life size on the movie screen, embracing in the lapping water. I stare at the man at the microphone, who leans forward with something like tenderness, but both more and less than tenderness. memory's enactment of love's keen attention. He breathes deeply, slowly, makes small sounds in a language entirely spit and flesh. In the soundproof booth where we can say anything, we stare and say nothing. If something is not real, does one feel more intensely? Why can we say nothing, not even to ourselves, as we watch what seems, although it is not, what it would be to each love ourselves and to stand thus before strangers, to roll up our sleeves and without fanfare or shame, get on with it. And for my last poem, before we get to hear Harriet, I'm reading a poem that is dedicated to Russell Jackson, who is a wonderful poet, now a friend of mine, but originally a student of mine at the Converse University MFA in Creative Writing program. And in the early days of COVID, in the first days of quarantine, Russell sent me an email, and almost immediately I knew that I wanted to write a poem for Russell. And this is the poem. I don't think that I need to give any more introduction to this because this poem has one of those kind of long, well, very long, informative titles that I really love writing. The poem is called For the Poet Who Writes to Me While Standing in Line at CVS Waiting for His Mother's Prescription. Oh, I just have to make sure I can turn the page. Okay, it's not that long. Don't worry. Okay, okay. Okay, for the poet who writes to me while standing in line at CVS waiting for his mother's prescription. For Russell Jackson. It's nothing you flat out say, Russell, but your email reminds me that 6 months into pandemic, 5 months into quarantine, CVS remains open 24 hours. Its harsh blue-white light steady, as nothing in nature is steady. Those long fluorescent bulbs still dive-bombing lumens so that midnight is bright as 8 a.m. or 4 a.m. or 2 p.m. or 7:30 p.m. You can see that I struggle to carry one thought to the next these long days. I spend hours on the internet, becoming expert on the height of actors from Hollywood's golden age, on the 25 cutest photos of 4-year-old Princess Charlotte. I now know that poet Elizabeth Bishop was a bit taller than I am, a bit heavier. Her clothes would be too big for me, as no doubt her shoes. Russell, what is it that supposedly concentrates the mind wonderfully? Samuel Johnson said it in Boswell's biography, which I have never read and never will. I know my limits. Lately, I think that I know little else worth knowing. My only advice for your poems, Russell, wash your hands for as long as it takes to sing Happy Birthday. Did you know that song is no longer copyrighted? 5 years ago, U.S. District Court Judge George H. King ruled Happy Birthday is public domain. The 1935 patent applied only to the melody and specific arrangements of the tune, but not to the actual song itself. When Judge King writes actual song, he means lyrics. But I hear him saying song is something beyond the reach of law, beyond reach of language. Song is like a kernel of light inside of things, steady. Russell, be like CVS. I don't know what this means, be like CVS. Russell, dare to say what doesn't make sense, then wait patiently to see the sense inside of it. Be like CVS. Be like the bewildering variety of toothpastes, decongestants, hair conditioners. Be like orange Velcro knee braces, the spools of pastel ribbon that hums pulled across a scissor. Be like the aisle of bare shelves where the cleaning products stood, where where the white metal shelves now display only how each shelf, with a simple, ingenious hook, fits into the frame. I'm telling you nothing that you don't already know, Russell. Be like whatever accepts the horrid light and shines in it. Be like the 8-ounce can of lightly salted cashews for which you are newly willing to pay $12.99 as you stand in line waiting for the blue-gloved hands to hold out to you the small white bag, which is not for you, except in that you are the one who will carry it where it must go. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. And I just love the way you take an observation and you run with it. And in running with it, you imbue it with so much meaning. It's so artful and brilliant. Thank you so much. Well, I don't know. I can't follow this great act, but I will try. So Wonder Wheel is a collection that is my only collection, and it just came out. And it's you can get it at Amazon, and it essentially has 3 parts. It has like my kind of from my background in Brooklyn, oh so very, very long ago. And then it has a part that focuses on my marriage, which was also so very, very long. And the last part is a kind of summary of many things. So I'm just going to read 1 or 2 from each section. And the first section is about Brooklyn, so very long ago. And the first poem is called Infraction. My first time in the principal's office. Long windows and an immense desk, a world map behind his bald head. My mother, bewildered, a tiny figure in a polished oak armchair. I was summoned for harassing Mrs. Mendelson, our 5th grade teacher. She was squat with wire-rimmed glasses, gray hair chopped at the ear. I can't remember my infraction. Not paying attention, maybe? Questioning her facts? Snickering at her pointed finger and flesh-colored stockings, her old lady shoes? I was, it seems, the ringleader. I sensed her lack of confidence, the other children's scorn. Now, nearly Mrs. Mendelssohn's age, I apologize. I apologize, but she has passed on, and I'm haunted by what I am capable of. So that's my one hard memory of being called to the principal's office because I was such a good little girl most of the time. And the next one is called That Liminal Space. Out the window, I stared at the neighbors' undershirts, hanging stiffly on the clothesline. A round fluorescent light shone down on the formica table in our canary yellow kitchen. My father at one end, celebrating a ripe cantaloupe. My mother at the other, bemoaning the weather. Me, wanting to run outside and play with a little sister I didn't have. She looks up at me now, from that liminal space between absence and not being there. I learned years later, my mother rode a taxi to an address scribbled on a slip of paper, opened her thighs, squeezed her eyes shut, and rid herself of a baby they could not afford. And one more from that time so long ago, and this is called Serpentine Ride, and it has the Wonder Wheel, and the famous Wonder Wheel in it. She rode the Wonder Wheel with a boy wearing a studded leather jacket, hair slick in a ducktail. She feared being locked up with him 150 feet above the Atlantic, no one to hear her scream. She imagined his muscled arm pulling her close, his smoky breath, having his way with her up in the air. They swung on the serpentine track toward the hub of the wheel and out to the edge of the circle. A momentary thrill as they lingered over the ocean. The balmy summer breeze, a sprinkling of stars, the boy harmless, her shudder of disappointment. She held onto the rail, swinging from fear to awe as they glided to the bottom, landing on the sidewalk where a gaggle of children screamed for more cotton candy. So that was sort of a little glimpse from that section of my book about Brooklyn so long ago. And this is about my long marriage. And this one is called Wife. The rumor is Prince Charles, now king, has his shoelaces ironed. Your mother ironed your dad's silk undershorts. I never ironed anything at all. Haunted by my own mother in her flowered apron, bent over a board, steam iron in hand, stamping fabric to her will. I put meatloaf on the table, wiped my hands on the back of my jeans, bought wash and wear clothes for our children, watched them tumble in the dryer. Instinct led me to a meandering path. You never complained. Your shirts came back from the laundry, folded and starched. I rocked our third infant into the night, reciting my dissertation outcomes in a bleary brain. And another one also related to marriage. It's called Catwoman. You crushed on Michelle Pfeiffer, those misty green eyes and high cheekbones. You favored the scene of her sprawled on the baby grand. I did not balk as long as you came home each night and loosened your striped tie with a sigh. As long as you took the boys downtown to shop for records, as long as you curled your fingers as if playing a clarinet and tapped your feet to the beat. When Michelle turned into Catwoman, tempting the Cape Crusader with her feline licks, I did not object, as long as you laughed when I swung from gravitas to gaiety and you admired my disguises. So that's Catwoman, and I think I wrote that in your class, Suzanne Cleary, if you remember it. So she helped me with that poem, absolutely. And then I'm just going to read from the end of the book, 2 poems. This is kind of like summary, some of the things that I tried to explore at the beginning. One is called Ghost of a Daughter. I wonder if I will die alone like my mother did. I flew to a city far from where she raised me. She was in her railed bed, wisps of hair spread on her pillow. I held out my hand, but she pushed it away. She stared at the bed rail. Next morning, I drove for coffee and a sausage biscuit. Then back. Still, she refused to know me. Ghost of a woman who learned geography and French, fled a Ukrainian village, and sailed on the SS Estonia. Me, ghost of a daughter, rushing to the airport for a flight home. And I always felt that, well, we'll talk about what happens with surprises when we write, sometimes when we write poems. And the very last poem in this book is called Wonder Wheel. Our gondola swings over the choppy waters, 150 feet above the Atlantic. It threatens to spill us out over the eroded beaches and into the frigid ocean. We lurch forward, but do not tumble. Land back on the ground, nod to unseen deities who bestow random mercy, and slip onto another amusement, a Nathan's hot dog smothered in sauerkraut, an overflowing cup of crinkle-cut fries. We hear the screams of folks riding the cyclone, thrilled to be skirting danger. And as we stroll the boardwalk, slats creaking underfoot, we ponder our tiny existence and debate the future of the planet, eager to prepare ourselves for the next heady ride. And thank you very much. And both Suzanne and I would love to answer any questions that you may have. And thank you for listening and for
Okay.
coming to our reading.
Well, I just want to mention, they were wonderful poems. I enjoyed listening to all of them. Really, besides the fact that I grew up in Brooklyn myself, the whole thing was fascinating. So thank you very much. So now if you have, we did get some comments during the readings. This is the one that really struck me. I'm so glad to be here and listen to these wonderful poems. They strike me as everyday ordinary, the kind that makes me feel that I could possibly write a poem as well. And then she's going to check it out. And there was another comment. Well, wonderful work. Thank you both. So there were a lot of thank yous. So if you have any questions, please type it into the chat function and I could read it. If not, I have my own questions. So I'll just wait a minute.
Okay, and I'd like to ask Suzanne about her new manuscript.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have a book manuscript that's been out traveling around from publisher to publisher. It's far more well-traveled than I am at this point. But it's getting some appreciative responses, but no one has yet published it. And I'm right now, I think every time I write a book, and this will be my 5th book, should it be published, as I hope it will be within the next year or so. Every time I work on a book, I'm really just writing poem by poem by poem until I see that I have a group of poems that sort of feels like they can live happily together. I'm usually not a poet who writes with an overriding theme to my work, but at the same time, I'm always writing about time. I'm always writing about I'll say it, death. I'm writing about mortality. But my new book of poetry is called The Odds, and it's looking for a publisher right now. But
The Odds, could you say that again?
yes, The Odds. It's looking for a publisher.
ODDS?
Yes, THEODDS, The Odds.
Yes.
And it's about, taking chances, your odds, the
Oh.
gamble that is life. And it's also about odd things. And I did see that one of the comments was about ordinary moments and absurdity. That hits my poetry on the head. That hits my interest in poetry on the head. I just want poems to wake me up to the ordinary because very often I'm oblivious to it. I feel I walk through my life without noticing things enough. And when I do notice something, that's maybe what becomes a poem. And that's, I think, maybe how the book, The Odds, has come together.
And don't you think, I think it's so you. I mean, I think we have our voice. We have our voice. And to me, your poetry is full of quirkiness, and it's also full of a sense of humor and an exploration of life and meaning in the littlest things.
Well,
So,
I thank you for that. And I would then have to say right back at you, Harriet, from the first time I met you, one of the things that really interested me in your work was this sense of your knowing what your subjects were. You know exactly you wanted to write about Brooklyn, and then you wanted to write about the Wonder Wheel, and not just the fact of this famous Wonder Wheel, but the sort of the sense of being up in the air and kind of it's listing all the time, and how on edge we are as readers when we're inside of your world, where you transport us right there. And of the three of us on screen right now, I'm the odd one out here, and that I'm not from Brooklyn. I'm from upstate New
oh
York,
my
from
God.
Binghamton. But you've taken me up in the Wonder Wheel, and I
Thank
I
you.
think that's what you do as a poet. I think you transport us to a
Thank
particular
you. Thank you
place.
so much. That's and Suzanne uh wrote a blurb for my book, which I really appreciated as well. And I know your book is going to be published somewhere. Just keep trucking.
Good
Well, right
advice.
there, right there.
Any questions? Any
But we have a lot more comments. I just want to start. Uh, so somebody just said about horse jacket, lovely. And then thank you, Suzanne. I love how funny your work is and the picture you paint for us. It takes me back to so many familiar moments, and especially the absurd ones. And then there was one from Harriet. Thank yous, what a pleasure. That Suzanne's book is unpublished just proves that some editors don't know good poetry when they see it.
That's true. Absolutely.
I suspect
And
my
then
husband
Harriet,
that in. He tells me that all the time.
Harriet's first poem took me back to having my boy, oops, I just lost it, boy savior badge revoked in first grade. What a shock. First glimpse of how unfair the world could be.
Oh,
Question is, how vulnerable do you feel in revealing your personal stories?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Yes.
Suzanne, you want to try that one?
I was actually turning right to you for that, Harriet, because you've written so much about your childhood in particular and your family. If you feel comfortable going first, I would love to hear
Sure. Sure. Well, let's see. I just think these are the things that, like these are the things that really struck you and that struck me and were important to me. I mean, there were uh, lots of things, but these are I can't, it's almost like unreal that what I remember is being called to the principal's office. It was the only one time, for example, but it must have been traumatic. It must have been traumatic for me, this little girl who was always so good about everything. And then there I am in the principal's office and being blamed for something. So it's amazing what we remember. They may seem like the most insignificant things, but to us, they were probably extremely significant.
Mm.
And I did go with that guy with the ducktail and the leather jacket on the Wonder Wheel, and I was scared. And he was the sweetest, nicest kid, but I didn't realize it because he looked so tough with his leather jacket and his ducktail. So, I mean, these are just kind of the little things, just like you pick a little observation and then you kind of interrogate it, so to speak.
You know,
That's true.
I love that verb interrogate, because that actually may be key to how I even write a poem. I identify something that interests me or catches my eye or sticks in my memory, and then I approach the writing of the poem saying, not to myself, oh, I'm going to write a poem, or goodness, I would never say, oh, I'm going to write a great poem. I never say that. But I say, I'm just going to spend time thinking about this thing that I've remembered, this detail. You know, as you remember, you know, Mrs. Mendelssohn. Oh, what a portrait you paint for us, Harriet, when you show us the teacher, Mrs. Mendelssohn. And what happens in the process of your describing her is you really are interrogating so much more. You're revealing a moment of your own childish mischievousness and even cruelty. There's great complexity in what you've just spoken of very modestly as kind of almost a stray, odd memory. But I think if we spend time with these things that we remember, any of us, we're bound to find that there's so much more there than we think there is. And
Yes.
and just to address the question which you asked, which is such a great question, do you this question in terms of vulnerability and writing about your life, I would have to say that I don't see myself as writing about my life that often, although I suppose I do. I write about my life a fair amount. But when I'm writing about that particular memory, it doesn't even feel like me, really. It almost feels like I'm watching a film. There's a certain distance there. And certainly I'm choosing my words carefully, and I'm selecting for my reader what goes into the poem and what stays back. So there's a lot of crafting involved in a poem, even if it's a poem that's based on life. So I never feel that I'm that vulnerable, and that I'm in the sense that I'm revealing something that I don't feel comfortable revealing. I always decide if I want to write about this before I write about it. And I'm careful to protect people in my life also. I'm someone who's not going to write a poem in which I reveal something about my sister's life, because that's her life. That's not my material. But I will write about myself. Hopefully, I'm
And,
not at
and
the center of my poems,
and
but
I always tell people that poetry is fiction, because you may take something that is true, like that incident was true for me, but then I embellish it, or I describe something. I don't know if it's exactly what I remembered, the oak desk or whatever, but you embellish it for the poem. So it's crafted, and in being crafted, it becomes fiction because it's not totally true.
I love that. Poetry is fiction. I agree with you 100%.
Okay, since you were talking, we got many more comments. So I'll just read it. Harriet, I can relate to your suffering in the principal's office. I too was a good child in school, but the long arm of the administration grabbed me and my friends for a minor infraction. I even remember our principal's name, Una M. Melton, a great person, very smart and kind, and so on. So you've opened up, Pandora's box here.
The floodgates now are open. I can feel it.
We're going to have a lot of confessions.
Okay. So it's wonderful. I too have a question or two. Well, somebody just asked that question, but what kind of feelings do you want your readers to be left with after they've listened to your poems? It's a hard one.
Suzanne? Huh,
Super.
that's a hard one. I give it to you because you're the teacher.
Okay. All right. What kind of feelings do I want my readers to be left with? I think, I want my reader, first of all, not to feel that they have to be able to label what they've experienced at the end of one of my poems. I'm very happy if a reader will say, "Oh, wow." And then sort of take
Okay.
time to figure out what it is they are feeling about my work. I think that one of the things I hope my poems will do will that they'll make a reader say, you know, I think I've experienced that myself. I've experienced that emotion, or I've been through that particular event or type of event. And
Mhm.
I'm very happy if one of my poems will make a reader say, I think now I'm going to write my poem about that subject. That to me it's of high praise.
Spoken like a real teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of think that as long as people are moved, um, they can take away what they want, because people will have different interpretations. Your poem, just like any work of art, I think just will exist on its own after you've written it.
Mhm.
And therefore people will have different interpretations or take different things away, and that's fine as long as they're moved by it in one way or another. I'm
Mm.
happy.
Yeah.
They don't have to they don't have to agree with me or think the way I do, or you know um have the same exact experience, as long as they're moved by it.
I I love that answer, Harriet. And I just want to add that I hope that my readers, each of whom I treasure, the fact that someone is taking time in their life to read words that I have written is just an unimaginable gift to me. I hope that each of my readers knows how much I appreciate the fact that they're reading my poems. And I I write for them. I don't necessarily know who my readers are. Sometimes they will write to me and say that a poem that I've written means something to them that moves me tremendously. But there are people who read my work and I never know that they read it. But I want to thank them, each of them, for reading.
Yes, and there is a it's a, I don't know, a connection, I
Mm.
guess.
Yeah.
It's a
Wonderful.
way of connecting with people in one way or another. And speaking of being vulnerable or writing about your personal life, um, I'm embarking on a new adventure of a collection of poems. It may be just a chapbook, or I don't even know if I'll ever publish it, but it's called Making Love at Over 70.
That
Great.
So
should be
that should that should spark some interest.
certainly. Well, I think on that note, we should end. So I want to thank Harriet Shenkman and Suzanne Cleary. So somebody wrote, sounds great, Harriet. So I think you'll get a lot of interest in that one, certainly.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It isn't what it might seem, but it has a
Doesn't
great
matter.
title.
It's a great, well, I love the dubbing room. I love that title. But
Yes,
I should ask, uh, um, how important do you think those book titles are? Are they very important?
I would say so, Suzanne.
Very.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're just getting lots of thank yous. Excellent and whatnot. So, yes, this would be a good time. Thank you again for
Well,
coming.
thank
And so,
you. Thank you, Suzanne, for participating with me, and it's my honor, believe me. You are such a wonderful teacher and a generous poet. And thank you, Joanne, for putting this all together.
Okay, it's wonderful. Well, again, thank you all. And this will be for those people, your friends, please tell them that this program is being taped and they could always go to Chappaqua Library website or any of the libraries that I mentioned, and they will have a taped recording of this program. So this program will go on in all the libraries' archives. So please tell that. So I thank you all again for coming, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.